one more thing we have to take advantage of and build, and that is psychological safety. And this may be the academic term. You may have heard this term before. This is thankfully getting a lot of popularity. The researcher who really proved this term, Amy Edmondson, brilliant research, has been working for 30 years, proving the importance of this principle on teams. This is the extent to which team members feel safe to express themselves, to take risks, to speak up when they disagree, right? To challenge each other when they're brainstorming ideas, to bring their whole selves to work. One of the reasons this is gaining in popularity as a term is that we're thankfully kind of having this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? We're recognizing the importance of that. Some pretty tragic events led up to finally recognizing that, but we're having that conversation at a new and better level than we've ever had before. And one of the things we see in the research is that DEI initiatives and increased diversity in a team, honestly, it's not that effective unless we build that sense of psychological safety, right? You can hire as diverse a team as you want. You can bring a team of diverse shared experiences and ethnicities and genders, et cetera. But if they don't feel free to actually express themselves, to speak up from the ideas that come from those different experiences, then we still have a monoculture. People still feel like they don't fit in. So psychological safety is something that's been hugely important in teams of all locations, all sizes. Why do I bring it up in the context of remote work? Why does it show up in the research there? Well, it's harder. It's harder to build psychological safety remotely, and that makes it more important to do intentionally. I mean, think about it, right? Where are my email novelists again? Where are you at, right? It's harder to speak up when you've got a team with a couple different email novelists. They're writing out a 5-paragraph essay about why they're right. And you're thinking, am I going to take the time to write one back? Or is this not that important of an issue? Because I have a different opinion, but maybe this isn't important enough to write a 5-paragraph email about, right? Or it's hard to speak up on a Zoom call, for example. We've got this Brady Bunch grid of faces. We can kind of see pixelated facial expressions, but maybe we might miss that flash of disagreement on someone's face. We might have an overtalker or two who never mute their microphone when they're not talking. And so as soon as they speak up, the camera shifts to them. And so the quieter people don't get heard. It's harder to build a culture where everyone feels safe to speak up, safe to disagree, and feels invited to contribute their ideas. It's harder to do that in a virtual capacity. So we need to take steps to emphasize it a bit more, to draw it out a bit more, and to build psychological safety a bit more. Well, so here's a couple ideas for you on how to do that. Right? The first is treat conflict as a form of collaboration. Treat conflict as collaboration. We have this tendency to get really territorial over our ideas, as if they were ours in the first place, right? My first book was a book called Myths of Creativity, and one of the biggest misconceptions in that book, one of the biggest myths in that book, is around creativity. It's not the endeavor of a solo genius. Creativity is a team sport. The ideas belong to the teams that helped refine them, even if one person is the one that spat them out in a brainstorming session. But we get territorial about our ideas, and as a result, when people have a differing idea, or when they push back on our idea, it starts to feel like conflict. It starts to feel like interpersonal conflict. It's not, it is conflict. It's task-focused conflict. And so it's a form of collaboration, of trying to make that idea better. And so the first thing is kind of drop that, recognize that this person is speaking from different experiences, different viewpoints, different perspectives, and they're contributing their idea because they care as much about the project as you do. And what we need to do is get the ideas together and make sense of how we're going to judge them before we start fighting for our idea or their idea. Every failure has a lesson inside of it, right? Failure, in fact, failure on teams and as individuals is inevitable. Failure is inevitable. Projects go awry, clients decide they want to go some other way, right? Things come in over budget, over supply chain issues happen, right? Failure is inevitable. Learning, however, is a choice. It's a conscious choice a team makes. And it only happens when members of the team take ownership for what they did, the assumptions behind what they did, and why that turned out not to match reality. Unless we can have that in the form of a proper, transparent after-action review, we don't actually get to pull the lessons from that failure. And that is what we need to celebrate, right? That level of ownership over the failure. And by the way, if you're in a leadership role, it starts with you. But as members of your team do that, instead of just trying to pass the blame, defend themselves, write a 5-paragraph essay about why they're blameless, that's not what we celebrate. We celebrate when people take ownership over that failure. We say, thank you, because if you hadn't taken that risk, we wouldn't have learned this. Thank you for your transparency on that. That is what I mean when I say celebrate failure. Last idea I have for you, and this one I think is especially important in a remote environment, is to encourage dissent, encourage that disagreement. We already know that conflict is a form of collaboration. So we need to encourage people to speak up, people to contribute a bit more often, right? Because it's in that moment that how, especially if we're in a leadership role, how we respond has a massive effect on whether or not people feel heard, feel respected, and whether or not people trust the group to continue to contribute their ideas. Right? When someone speaks up to a group, they're taking a risk. And we want to encourage people to take that risk more often so we can show this is a place where people are trusted. So we need to encourage dissent. And the truth is, in virtual communication and virtual collaboration, we don't really open that door often enough, do we? Right? I mean, we had this habit, even before the pandemic, we had this habit in meetings. We're moving towards consensus on a plan. And then usually the facilitator will throw out something like, right at the very end. Okay, before we make the final decision, any questions, concerns, clarifications? You ever heard that, right? Questions, concerns, clarifications, comments, concerns, the 3 C's, if you will. But it's like a rhyme, right? Questions, concerns, clarifications. It's like, honestly, especially when it's at the end of the meeting and everybody's looking at the clock, honestly, that line, it feels like when you're at a wedding, right? And the officiant says, if anyone has a reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your questions, concerns, clarifications, right? You're not supposed to say anything, especially if somebody has a hard stop and needs to be on another Zoom call, right? You're not supposed to say anything. That's not encouraging dissent. That's not opening the door enough. Or we're debating an idea in email or in the project management software, and somebody just writes their position and why they think they're right, and then just writes thoughts, ? At the end. That's not encouraging dissent. That's not opening the floor wide enough. What if we took it on us, instead of just saying questions, concerns, clarifications, or any comments, etc.? What if we took it on us and said, it sounds like we're all headed towards consensus. It sounds like we're leaning towards this direction, but I have my own background, my own past experiences that creates my own biases and my own blind spots. So what am I missing? Right? This is a totally different question, isn't it? Questions, concerns, clarifications versus what am I missing? Can you help me see this from a different angle? Help us find what we might be missing. Totally different. Opens the door to that. And there may be situations where after a question like that, we have to encourage a specific person. Maybe we do it ahead of time, encourage a specific person to speak up to kind of open up the discussion. But a question like that is much more of an encouragement. And then when you respond to their different idea, to their dissent, when you treat that task-focused conflict as collaboration, you build trust, you build respect on the team, and you build that sense of psychological safety.